Hello everyone, this is Hakaym and welcome back to another video of World of Warships, and today we are looking at the newly released Tier 7 Premium British Battleship, the Nelson. And I have to say, it's really nice to actually finally get a premium British battleships, because I've never actually owned the Warspite, and the Nelson, she's quite something else. She is very similar to the Ismo, and a lot of people don't like this, but overall she's not a bad ship. She's fairly decent. I've had a good time with her, but at the exact same time there are some limitations to the ship, and what most people complain about are things that are actually very true. But she can pull her own weight for the most part. But anyway, let's take a look at the stats. Alright, let's take a look at the survivability. For the health, you're looking at 59,400, which is actually pretty good for the Tier 7 battleships compared to the other ships, such as the Nagato and the Colorado. The Nagato has the most at around 65,000, and the Colorado and the Gneiss now are around 56 to 58,000, so she's actually the second highest. Now, one thing to keep in mind is her armor layout. 25 millimeters on the bow and 32 millimeters on the side. So if we take a quick look on the interior, we see 356, 305. Now, I have noticed, especially right here, this is probably the worst spot. It is very, or at least it seems very easy to Citadel the Nelson from the rear. As you can see down here, the Citadel athwartship back here is around 32 millimeters, and the aft end plating is 25, so it's very easy to Citadel and Nelson from the rear. And it also, from my experience, seems to be easily Citadeled from almost a fairly good angle. So yeah, I can understand why a lot of people have complaints. As you can see, there are certain spots where she is very vulnerable. As you can see, this Citadel torpedo bulkhead, which is below water, can be easily Citadel at 38 millimeters. So yeah, I've been Citadeled kind of awkwardly, and I don't really understand why. And it can be quite annoying when you think you are angled enough to actually bounce shells and you still get Citadeled. I've Citadeled another Nelson through the bow fairly easily with these guns, and it can be annoying because the ship really, like I said, is very similar to the Ismo, so it likes to kind of stay more bowed in, and it does a great job because the guns actually, let's actually quickly talk about the guns, are actually of a more, I would say, better design than the Ismo. As you can see, they all face forward. The Ismo has a rear third turret that faces to the back, so it takes it a much longer time, saying going from starboard to port. It would have to do the full 180 to 230 degrees just to get it turned to the port side, while obviously with the Nelson it can actually very easily turn its turrets, very similar to how the front two turrets are. So that's the really nice thing about the Nelson, is that her third turret actually faces forward instead of facing towards the rear. So this can prove beneficial, especially if you can, if you need to get your turrets turned from starboard to port side, you can get it done fairly easily and get all 9 guns to bear. She does, like I said, have 9 guns, 3 guns per turret, 406 millimeters, very similar to how the Nagato and the Colorado, very similar as far as caliber. The reload time is 30 seconds, so very similar to how the other battleships are. Turn time on the guns is 45 seconds, which does seem very slow. But one thing to keep in mind, my captain does not have expert marksman on his skill tree yet. And we'll talk about the captain, as you can see, is Jack Dunkirk. We'll talk about him when I get to the captain skills. Max HE damage is actually really unique to the British battleships, apparently, and this includes the Nelson. Is max HE damage is 6,900, but the fire chance is 46%. If we take a look at, say, the Colorado, for example, the Colorado has only a 36% fire chance. So the Nelson has a higher fire chance for her guns, and this seems to be the case throughout the British battleships, especially the Tier 10 Conqueror, which can almost be essentially a bigger Zao with its very high fire chance. But if you need to, you can always switch over to HE. And this is kind of one thing I kind of like about the British battleships, is it's actually kind of forcing some battleship captains to actually think, should I be firing armor piercing or should I fire HE? But most times AP is generally what you'll be using. The only time I would recommend HE is if you're going off against, say, North Carolinas or Iowas, because you are a Tier 7 and you are going to experience the bow in of the USN battleships a lot. So HE is a good option to go with instead of firing your AP. Now the AP is not too bad, although it does have a shorter fuse, very similar to how the other British battleships are, and also their cruisers. So that does mean that it can't always fully penetrate through the armor and actually do full damage, such as getting a citadel. I actually found it quite difficult to get a citadel on battleships. Getting on cruisers fairly easy. You can do great damage against destroyers, but battleships, it seems to have a slight issue. But as far as damage wise, 12,000 points of damage, which is pretty decent. It's very similar to how the other Tier 7 battleships are, so you're not losing a lot of potential alpha damage, but you are losing the potential full penetration value that you can get with other battleships, which means you can actually get those citadels that are further hidden away by armor. Max range is 18.2 kilometers, kind of on the lower end for sure, which is unfortunate, but it's still not terribly bad. You still have that decent range, but most of the other battleships will outrange you compared to what you can actually do. So you do have to keep that in mind on when you're facing off against other battleships. Now the velocity on the shells are slow, 788 meters per second. They do have a slight hang time, so you do have to give the proper amount of aim to actually ensure that your shells land where you want. Now she does have secondary guns. She has 6 single 120 millimeters. They fire HE. They will have a 1700 max HE damage, 8% fire chance, and a 5.3 kilometer range. Then she has 6 dual 152 millimeters. They fire AP only, which is slightly aggravating because I prefer that fire chance. They fire every 12 seconds, and they have a 3,100 AP damage with a 5.3 kilometer range. Not very often that you will be using your secondaries. More often than not, you're going to be a little bit further back, not saying all the way back, but your secondaries are primarily in the rear of the ship, which makes sense since the majority of your main guns are in the front. So they are your potential protection for any ship that decides to get behind you. But once again, they're not the most amazing secondaries you could have. So you definitely don't want to be relying them on all that much. Now her secondaries are decent. I rarely actually got the opportunity to truly test out the AA guns on them. You do have 35 single 20 millimeter Orlikins. They have an average damage of 126 with a 2 kilometer range, and then you have 6 Octo Vickers, 40 millimeters. Average damage is 119 with a 2.5 kilometer range, and then your additional secondaries, which are your long range. Average damage is 36 with a 4.5 kilometer range. As you can see, very tight AA circle. You could obviously buff this up with advanced firing training, but overall it's more of a self-defense more than anything else. I have shot down a few planes, but it's nothing extraordinary that I would highly recommend that you can go off by yourself when facing off against CVs. Now moving on to maneuverability, she goes around 24 knots, which is, I believe, the second lowest. Colorado is still a little bit slower than you are. The turning circle radius is 750 meters, which is kind of about the same. It's definitely not as tight as the Colorado, but it's not as big as the Nagato's at 770. So overall, not too bad. Rudder shift time is at a lazy 14.9 seconds. Now, there's a reason why it's actually quite this big, and I will talk about it when we get to the modules. If you want, you can actually reduce that, but at the moment, this is what I have, and this is what to expect on a stock Nelson without additional modules to increase that rudder shift time. So rudder shift time's kind of bad. It can be very frustrating, especially if you need to try to make a turn, and it does take a while to get that rudder moved over from one side to the other. Concealment is amazing. 12.8 kilometers. 12.8. That is very, very small for a tier 7. So if we compare it to, say, the Colorado, let me actually grab the Colorado. 16.7. Obviously, that's without any additional captain skills, and that should bring it down around 14, I believe. I believe the Nagato's probably about the same. Let's actually grab the Nagato. 17.1. So yes, the concealment on this is very nice. 12.8 kilometers. Very tight and very secretive, and that's something you're gonna have to be using a lot, especially since you do have a shorter range compared to the other battleships of the same tier, and especially since you are going off against possibly tier 9s and obviously even possibly tier 8s. So this additional low detectability will allow you to get a little bit closer if you need to, or better yet, if you need to pull away, you can. As you will see in the replay, I do this time and time again, using my low detectability to disappear for a little bit and open up when they're not expecting it. Detectability range by air is 10.6. Once again, fairly decent on the British battleships, and I really am liking that very small detectability, and it really does prove beneficial when you are in these very high tier games. Now moving on to the modules. The additional modules that I have gone with is Main Armaments Mod 1. This obviously reduces your guns. Now you could obviously possibly go for Auxiliary Armaments Mod 1, which increases the survivability of your AA guns and secondaries by 100%. Could prove beneficial, especially since it's very rare nowadays that your main guns will get taken out of action, but that is one option you can go with. The second one is Aiming Systems Mod 1. Now, British battleships have a very low Sigma value, which makes their shells very, very tight, and more than likely to land where you're aiming. Not to say that RNGs will always go your way, but overall, when I've played in the Nelson, I've had fairly good salvos where the shells are very, very tight, and it does prove beneficial. And obviously this will increase the dispersion, decrease it a little bit more, so it can help you, and also it will allow you to get those much needed citadels against cruisers. Now for the last two, I have obviously gone for Damage Control System Mod 1. It's normally what you get on battleships. And for the second one, instead of doing the Steering Gears Mod 2, I went to make the ship very tanky. Now there's a good reason why I made the ship very, very tanky. If you look at the heel, and we're going to quickly talk about the consumables, the heel that the Nelson has is the original, as far as I can tell, is the original heel that the previous British battleships were supposed to have. I don't know if they are going to knock it down. It sounds like they will, but you will get 1,425 points of health per second, and the activation time is 20 seconds. So you can get a staggering 2,800 points of health back of light damage. Obviously, any fire damage, you can get that back. And this is probably the one most major complaints people have about British battleships so far, is the fact that they are going to be essentially zombie battleships. As soon as you think you've killed a British battleship, nope, they get majority of their health back very, very quickly and very easily. Now, obviously, this does not include any citadel damage, as obviously you do not get the full repair worth that you get when you have only fire damage, as well as torpedo damage is very similar to citadels. So that is something to keep in mind, is if you are lit up by fires by HE, and this is generally one thing that this Nelson is pretty bad at, is facing off against HE. Her top deck is very, very thin. Let's quickly put stuff back on. There we go. As you can see, 32 millimeters. Her top deck is very, very thin, and generally HE tends to penetrate and actually do cause a fairly significant amount of damage, and that's why I did choose to go with a more tankier build for my Nelson, make her a little bit more sustainable, especially against the fires that you can possibly get from enemy cruisers. But with that heal, it does allow you to get a majority of that health back. So moving on to the captain, which is my Jack Dunkirk captain. Now, originally when the Jack Dunkirk came out, he is the second unique captain that you can get. Obviously, the first one was of that really stupid actor. I hate his voice, and unfortunately he's on my USN destroyers, but he is unique as the fact that he has 3 special abilities that are better than the normal captains that you would get. So Jack of all trades gives you a minus 10% to reload time of all mounted consumables instead of the normal minus 5%. Then the expert marksman, you get additional half a degree for the guns of a caliber above 139 millimeters, which will prove beneficial once I actually do get this skill, because the guns on the Nelson tend to turn very, very slow, so I definitely would recommend this. And the additional benefit of Jack Dunkirk compared to other captains is smokescreen expert, which obviously does not prove beneficial for a British battleship. Now, my Jack Dunkirk is going to be my main British battleship captain. So currently I'm just working on him until the British battleships come out, and then I will obviously switch him over. But when you do have your British captain on here, I really do enjoy priority target. I still recommend this. It's very nice to know how many ships are aiming at you. If you do have Jack Dunkirk, having Jack of all trades is beneficial, but honestly, I would say expert marksman, then go for superintendent so you can get that additional heal, and then concealment expert. So the other 9 points I would recommend is possibly adrenaline rush, so I'll give you 2 points. You can get basic firing training if you want to boost your AA a little bit. That'll be 5. You could go for high alert, reduces the damage control party, or you can even go for fire prevention, which reduces the chance of fire by 10%, as well as only having 3 sources of fires instead of 4 like you normally see on battleships. Now, honestly, I have to say I don't think she's going to be that really beneficial against enemy aircraft, so you can try to buffer. You can go for advanced firing training, try to increase the additional AA, but overall I generally would say just go for survivability on this British battleship. But overall, she's not that bad of a ship, so we're gonna quickly jump into a replay with her, and you guys take a judge for yourself on whether or not you actually want to get her. See you guys there. Alright everyone, welcome back in with a replay, and we are playing on Land of Fire. We have a Ranger, North Carolina, Bismarck, Colorado, Nelson, Fuso, Mogami, Chapayev, Atlanta, Cleveland, Kagero, and Minsk. On the enemy team, there is a Ranger, Alabama, Amagi, Colorado, Gneisenau, Bayern, Mogami, Otago, Pensacola, York, Ognovoy, and Gade. And I have to say, I will say this right now, especially if you are still debating whether or not to use your free XP to get this ship. When I first got her, I had really fantastic games. Really fantastic games. And it was when the Nelson was first released. Now, as of late, I'm actually having a little bit more difficulty actually getting fairly good games. And this is probably one of the best games I've had with her. And it really comes down to the fact of her limitations, I guess you could say. Her limitations obviously is due to the fact that there is the chance that you will get Citadel quite easily, and it can get extremely aggravating. Now obviously once you get the captain fully upgraded, there are going to be benefits that you can get, and I have to say, look at the salvo. The salvo is fantastic. Shot out at that Pensacola, he went ahead and disappeared behind all this smoke screen that has gone around, and look at that, 2 Citadels. Now the reason why I said that it definitely has kind of gone downhill for me, at least as far as what I've owned as owning the Nelson, I will have to say that due to the fact that sometimes RNG just does not like you. I just had a game where shots off against a Belfast and just goes all the way around her, and normally I would expect that the Sigma should be fairly low, and even then obviously you're still gonna have those times when you're just gonna have horrible dispersion. But overall, I will have to say I do like the Nelson. I just think once the captain is fully upgraded and with better skills, she'll be slightly more fun. But anyways, the enemy team is kind of pushing to all 3 caps. There is a enemy Megami, and you kind of see how the guns turn. They feel sluggish to me. Shots off at this Megami. Let's see if we can get a Citadel on this Megami. Not too bad. 4 for penetration, did around 8,000 points of damage, which is not too bad, and it looks like the friendly Minx does take out the enemy Ognovoy. So now we can just focus on this Megami. That would be fan-freaking-tastic. It'd be nice if we can get some Citadels. It looks like he is showing us a nice broadside. We do have a friendly Atlanta that is being very ballsy, and there we go. Got a Citadel on that Megami. Very, very low on health. And you know, I would assume that this Atlanta might be able to take care of this Megami. So I do switch my attention over to the Pensacola, thinking probably should take him out, but I just don't want to waste a salvo on this Megami. But this Megami does not want to go down at all, and I think I might have to take it in my own hands to actually take out this Megami. So thoughts on the Nelson, especially on whether or not you want to use your 375,000 free XP to get her. She's not a bad ship. Like I said, she's not a bad ship. And this is especially me recording after having 2 losses in the Nelson. And it really comes down to teams. If you don't have a good team, there's very little the Nelson can actually do. And that's almost every single ship in World of Warships. That's a big difference between World of Warships and World of Tanks, is it's nigh impossible to actually make a comeback from losing majority of your team versus the majority of the enemy team. And there we go, took out the Megami. So there's our very first kill. Very nice. And we have lost the Atlanta. Yeah, Atlanta is kind of bit iffy on how long it will survive. So Pensacola is still around. We do have 2 friendly destroyers that are pushing out. Don't exactly know why. And looks like the Pensacola is wanting to get some revenge on me for those 2 very early Citadels. And that's one very damning thing about if you take a lot of damage early game, there's very much you can do. You can't really push out. You can't be aggressive. You have to play very passively if you've taken a lot of damage. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to this Pensacola. Let's see if we can take him out. Obviously, you realize that I have focused on him, and he is peeling away. and unfortunately only one of those shots are going to hit, but we still got around 3,000 points of damage right there. So overall, not too bad. Now the enemy team is pushing quite heavily at A. They have both A and B, while our friendly team is... I really don't understand what they're doing, but they're all kind of clustered down south of A. And I normally in this situation, I would probably put my money on the enemy team. But for whatever reason, the enemy team doesn't really push out. And there we go. Finished off the Pensacola. Very, very nice. Now we don't have to worry about this. So as far as the Nelson, I like the look of her. I really, really do. I like the way she looks. She kind of has this, I don't know, I don't want to say majestic look to her, but she does have this kind of nice look to her. Now, there is the enemy Gade that I believe is going for a CV run. Yes, we have 2 destroyers going for a CV run. Not a big fan of this. Never, ever recommend going for a CV run this early in the game. Now, yes, that can prove beneficial if you can actually get the CV, but most times the CV will spot any enemy destroyers that are starting to push out. Now, it did take off, or did shoot a salvo towards that Gade, but we have a friendly Chapayev that is going to be moving down to assist our friendly CV. So I'm going to actually switch my attention over to the enemy team that is once again not being aggressive. This is where they really need to do. Yes, they have 2 caps, but they're just kind of sailing away. They have a few battleships that aren't really proven beneficial. It looks like this Baron is trying to come in to assist, and the Colorado is taking up destroyer defense, I guess. He's going after our destroyers, which, I mean, is good, I guess. But 5 hits on that Bayern, and especially against lower tier battleships, the AP does a pretty good job, especially that Bayern, as you will see when he pops back into view. We got about 20,000 points of damage on him, which is pretty decent. Definitely will prove beneficial later in the match, taking off that additional damage. Gonna go ahead and try to get a few hits on this Colorado. And this is one thing I will have to say. It was very fortunate, at least for me. Look at that, 15,000 points of damage. That was no citadels. That was only penetrating the main armor belt. So decent amount of damage. Got a few hits in from that enemy Baron, which is unfortunate. But you can see how nice it is with this low detection. And I am going to be using that to my full advantage every so often if I can disappear and open up when they are not really able to. Look at that, 13,000 points of damage right there. And that was only 3 shell hits and 1 over penetration. So overall, not too bad. Now, the enemy team is clustered over A, which is granted giving me free reign over here. And then here's this enemy York. Look at this. This is going to be a nice salvo. Now you can kind of see how much angle you have to give just to get that 3rd turret out there. And look at that Citadel, and this York is still kicking until now. Look at that lone shell on the right hand side actually penetrated the Citadel, and there we go. Got a devastating strike on the enemy York. And the enemy team is starting to lose ships, but at the exact same time, they are actually doing a fairly decent job taking out our own friendly ship. Now, the enemy Gade is still alive and kicking. Don't know exactly what he's doing. Looks like the Colorado is now chasing our minks around the island. And looks like the friendly Fuso takes out the Alabama with a ram. And this Alabama is not going to be happy. Oh, good lord. That was actually really funny to see. So, right now, I will have to say this is probably the only reason why I did so well in this match is due to the fact that I was not focused at all. I was allowed free reign over the majority of this battle, and I really think it just came back and bit the enemy team in the butt because essentially I was allowed to get free shots off and didn't really have to deal with any damage from the enemy team. So hoping we can get this Gade, and this Gade is going to be a salty captain here in a second. So he has a Chapayev chasing after him, and he is going to be super salty about the Chapayev here in just a second, as you will see in chat. So I like the Nelson, don't get me wrong. It's just after those games, it's kind of put a bad taste in my mouth. She can do fantastically well. Her AP is pretty decent. Her fire chance is nice as well, especially against enemy North Carolinas and Iowas. That HE will prove beneficial. So as far as her A defense in there, watch chat. This is just really super funny to see him talk and chat about that last hit from the Chapayev. So her AA defense is alright. Unfortunately for us, we actually don't get bothered by the enemy CV, which unfortunately does not show off the AA. But against tier 7s, you can manage to shoot down planes, but it really has to come to the fact that they have to be within that 2 to 2.5 kilometer range to get the most out of your AA guns. So that's the really super bad thing, is the fact that you do have to be have the planes within that range, and that's really can be unnerving sometimes, especially if they are torpedo planes. They can actually drop outside your short distant AA guns. So salvo off against a Ranger, and not the greatest. I believe I aimed a little bit further than I really should have. It's always hard to gauge and actually remember what the Ranger's speed is. I always forget the Ranger's speed. Actually, I think it's faster. It's definitely up in the 30s. So the kick arrow does take out the Ranger, and unfortunately the Colorado actually takes out the Minx. Where did that Minx go? Actually, I'm kind of curious. So you can see with this nice low detectability that we're able to get fairly close to the enemy team. We have some shot salvo off at the Bjorn, and see how I'm constantly adjusting my angle, because I know this Colorado is probably going to focus on me. I'm this closest target, so I'm gonna quickly peel away, and this can be dangerous. It looks like he's firing HE. Okay. Probably didn't have to worry so much. Now, this is extremely dangerous, is showing your stern to enemy battleships. Because like I said, the Nelson has a tendency to get citadel from the rear. And also, right above the smokestack, as you saw in port, the armor there is fairly weak. And you can get citadel if shell does penetrate coming in from the top. So you can have that happen to you. So, finally pushing in, the Baron's very low in health. He's the second to last battleship on the enemy team. And as far as damage-wise, we're doing pretty well. We're doing really well, which I'm really enjoying. This just increase in damage. Can we get another kill? Oh, unfortunately not. But we do earn high caliber, and the Baron does go down. And all that's left on the enemy team is the Colorado. Alright, so with that taken care of, we have officially captured A, and we are sitting at a beautiful 154,546 points of damage. So overall, not too bad. Now with the Nelson, you can get up to speed very, very quickly, especially against a Colorado, which can only get around 21 knots. So obviously not that much more that the Nelson can do, but it's 3 knots faster, and you can actually creep up on him. Now obviously the Colorado has better range than the Nelson, and that is one thing you do have to keep in mind, is the fact that he can easily outrange you if he wanted to. But once again, the Nelson can creep up faster than the Colorado, and this Colorado is just terribly out of position. He went after the Minx, and it's just peeling away. So this is once again a situation where World of Tanks, it would possibly be feasible that you could come back and look at that dispersion. So overall, pretty good. 16k. Look at that. 5 penetrating shots and 1 over penetration. And this is kind of what I feel like the Nelson does really well at, is these kind of longer range shots where the shells are coming more in at a steeper angle than if you were a little bit closer, because it's actually dropping in at a level where the armor's not as thick. So yeah, I'm definitely liking the Nelson. And is it worth to buy it? Yeah, I have to say, especially if you want to work on getting your British captains worked on. You can get a lot more experience from a tier 7 game than a tier 6 game. But we're going to quickly jump into the victory screen. So our team earned a victory, and we brought home 735,236 silver, 6,669 XP. We earned high caliber and a devastating strike. We did 171,006 points of damage, 47 shell hits, 3 kills, 5 citadels, 2 base captures, and 1 assisted capture. We were top of the team with a base XP of 2,868 XP. We did 34,000 against the enemy Megami, around 32,000 against the Pensacola, around 20,000 against the York, around 52,000 against the enemy Bayern, around 32,000 against the Colorado, and a measly 3,000 against the Ranger. Armor piercing is primarily what we fired. Once again, the high explosive ammo is fairly decent, especially with that high fire chance. It really does prove beneficial in the long run. So this is going to be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like what you saw, hit the like and subscribe button. You guys have a great and fantastic day. Zai Jin.